Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mick Baccio. I'll be the moderator for this. In Baltimore terms, like I'm really old. I'm more like yo old than dummy old, if that makes sense. Uh, my career path was mostly like delinquent to military. Then I got out. I was part of a cybersecurity team at Health and Human Services when that was first built out. Then I did incident response at the CDC. Then I ran the security operations team at the Food and Drug Administration, ran the incident response team at the Pentagon, went back to Health and Human Services, helped build out their threat intelligence program. Then I went to the Library of Congress for 40 days. And then I got a call from the White House saying, hey, do you want to come work at the White House? And you don't say no. So I worked the White House over the Obama administration, the Trump administration, went to work for Pete Buttigieg for his campaign, and now I'm over at Splunk on a team called CERT. It's a research group. So my pivots to cyber are really like pivoting to different jobs because I got bored or just couldn't hold one. I just got tired of it. But I want to introduce our panel. We've got Tracy Malif, InfoSec Sherpa, and make sure I don't butcher it, Tim Nordvet from SYNAC. So I wanted to give you both time. Give me your name, your handle, what you currently do, and where.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Mayleaf. I'm also known as InfoSec Sherpa. I am currently in between jobs. so but yeah, I have an interesting career. I went from travel agent to librarian to information security professional. And yeah, so I've worked in SOC, Security Operations Centers, for a global pharmaceutical company, the New York Times, and more recently I was a cybersecurity consultant for a private company. And now I'm here today to talk to you all about my weird path into InfoSec.
And I'm Tim Nordvet. As mentioned, my current role is I am a solutions architect for SYNAC. We are an offensive security testing firm. I've done a variety of roles in cyber. I've been in the space for about 3 years right now. My handle is Rebel Slicer. Over lunch or beers later, come ask me where I got that from. Happy to tell you.
So for those folks, a lot of folks here are new, what is a solutions architect? I know you and I were joking earlier about what exactly that role does. And when I say everything, it pretty much is everything. You're the firefighter putting out all the fires for sales folks. But what does that mean specifically at SYNAC? What does a solutions architect do in the realm of cyber?
In the realm of cyber, I mean, to put it simply, we architect solutions.
You can't use the word you're defining in the depth. There's rules.
So what that means is I work both on the pre-sales and the post-sales sides, and as an offensive security testing firm, a lot of initial requirements are just driven by compliance. We've talked about GRC. Government says I have to have this tested, so please come test it. That's not always the way you can get the most value out of security testing. So as a solutions architect, my role is to come in, look at your requirements, look at what we have to offer, look at your current program, and then kind of develop a solution. How can we get the most value for you, not beyond just compliance, but actually increase your security posture? How can we position this assessment not just to meet those minimum requirements, but go beyond that and actually make you a more secure organization?
So I wanted to talk a bit about, neither of you started in cyber. Like I joined the military, I found that I was colorblind, and they're like, hey, go do computers. So that's the career path. But neither of you kind of went that route. What was the pivot for you, Trace? What was the initial, like, you were doing this, and then I want to go be a cyber nerd?
Sure.
Like, how'd that happen?
Well, my pivot started with me crying on a train. I had reached, I couldn't really go any further in my library career. So my career was stagnant. I was also concerned about long-term prospects. It was at a time in 2014 when I was a law firm librarian. Law firms were merging, closing, and I didn't want to be one of 100 librarians in Philadelphia looking for a job. And it got me really stressed and upset, so I would be crying on the train. And I don't mean like polite sniffles, I mean like ugly crying sunglasses on. So I read this article in Entrepreneur Magazine called How to Future-Proof Your Career. And I was like, oh, great. So I read this. And one of the things that struck me and led me to this cybersecurity path was think about all your past jobs, classes, experiences. What was the common thread between all of them? And I had a good think about it when I was going back and forth commuting on the train and realized that tech was that common thread. I once had a job at a university where I found a back channel email they didn't know existed. And I like to poke around and find other things. So fast forward to 2015, I declared it the year of my career. And I went to all kinds of meetups and classes and things, and I kept focusing on tech. And I went to enough meetups for tech, and I thought, I really don't like these people. These people are obnoxious. So that's when, after watching me spin my wheels for a little bit, a friend of mine who'd been in tech for a long time, but was more on the back end cybersecurity side, said, let me talk to you about cybersecurity. I think you'd be good at this. So that really kind of changed my focus. And then cybersecurity became my quirky hobby. I really identified with it. I found myself I set up Google News alerts for cybersecurity events, and I also set it up for tech events, but I kept finding myself clicking on all the cybersecurity news stories. And then in September 2015, I boldly reached out to the CIO of the law firm and said, hey, cybersecurity is my quirky hobby. What's the law firm doing for Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October? And he said, what's Cybersecurity Awareness Month? To which I replied, here is my 5-point plan, which I propose that we execute. So just as a quick side note for that, don't be afraid to kind of take control and throw things out there. I can't even imagine what my career trajectory would have been like if I wasn't brave enough to put myself out there. Because what was the worst that was going to happen? He was going to say no, right? I wasn't going to get fired for it or anything. I sent him my 5-point plan. I get a response back right away. This is great. I love this. You're going to run it. Remember, I was still a librarian at the law firm. So he had a marketing person assigned to me and a help desk person assigned to me to help, modify things, make things a little prettier, infographics. And we did, there was 5 Fridays in October of 2015, and every Friday we sent this firm-wide, message out with an infographic, about phishing or why, the perils of free Wi-Fi was one of them. And, phishing, don't be a great catch and stuff like that. But then November 1st came along and I said, oh, that was great. That was so much fun. What else can I do for the firm for cybersecurity? And the CIO said, oh, you can just do that again next year for us. Well, I had tasted the blood of cybersecurity and I wanted more. So I created a company. I started Sherpa Intelligence. And I up and quit my job in February 2016. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to RSA, the RSA conference in San Francisco, which I believe is the world's largest information security.
Really
It's a lot of people. It's like 60,000 of your closest frenemies. Because I had then started this business as a consultant using my research skills and my social media skills to help cybersecurity companies. So somebody said, we want you to go to RSA and cover some things for us, write some blog posts, do things on site. I turned that into my own business for 1.5 years before I was able to get an interview. Ironically, the day that WannaCry hit in May 2017. And I was able to get hired as a SOC analyst, Security Operations Center analyst. And just the importance of keeping track of the news is that because my interview was the day of the WannaCry incident, I remember thinking, if I were me, I would ask me some ways that I would remediate this issue that was still developing. And I kid you not, the very last question they asked me during the interview was, hey, something's going on, we don't really know what yet, why don't you tell us some ways that you would remediate it? Because I had practiced it, and because I had a different viewpoint, being a librarian and having more customer-focused, customer-centric professional experiences, the first remediation I offered, the guys turned to each other and said, expletive, we didn't even think of that. And I got the job. So that is my wild, crazy trajectory to get, my tortuous path into here. Yeah.
So I would caution anyone to just volunteer to do that, because I think you'll end up doing volunteer things and not get paid for them for your entire career if you'll let them.
What do you mean? When I had my business, you mean?
No. Doing Cybersecurity Awareness Month for the firm.
Oh, for that. Well, I mean, I was still paid as a librarian.
Oh, yeah, that's big bucks are rolling in, library money.
Law firm librarians make
That's
bank.
fair. That's true. That's very true.
I'm no dummy. I wasn't going.
Tim, what about you?
Yeah, so I am a native Marylander, born and raised in Howard County, Maryland. I now live out in Carroll County, Maryland. When I graduated high school, went to college, quickly found out college was not for me, so I dropped out after 1 year. Went to a bunch of different jobs, kind of landed as an accountant for a local car dealership. Did that for almost 20 years. Started in the late 90s and was just a bookkeeper, office manager, accountant for a car dealership. Around 2010, for various reasons, I had to pick up a part-time job. I was an avid cyclist, so I started as a bicycle mechanic. One thing led to another, and that part-time job turned into a full-time job. And from 2010 to 2018, I found myself working 2 full-time jobs. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I was an accountant. Nights and weekends, I was a bicycle mechanic. I had a wife and 2 kids, and realized I can't do this forever. I'm getting tired. I never see my kids. I'm barely making end meet. One day they're gonna have to go to college. I have enough money to pay the bills, but nothing extra to set aside. So in 2017, I realized, I got to make a change here. I got to do something different. So roll back, to my childhood. I had an uncle who was a computer programmer for NSA his entire career. He bought me my first computer in the 80s, a Commodore 64. So in elementary school, while my friends were playing, the original Nintendo and Sega, I was teaching myself Pascal and BASIC, learning how to build programs to do all my homework for me. I spent weekends at swap meets buying random parts and floppy disks for my next project. So I tell everyone, I've been a closet computer nerd my entire life. So when I was looking to make this career transition, I knew I had this untapped skill set. I was very comfortable with technology, and I had a lot of friends that were making bank in the tech industry. But there was nothing on my resume that would equate to, let's hire this guy. So I knew I had to formalize my skill set. So I enrolled in, actually before I enrolled, Howard Community College is where I wanted to go start off at. I scheduled an appointment to meet with the dean of the college and said, hey, look, I've got 2 full-time jobs, wife and kids. I have less than no time. I want to give you guys money to kind of get some formal training here, but I want to be effective with that. I want to make sure whatever training I pursue, there's going to be a marketable skill set on the outcome. Initially, I was thinking programming or something like that because that's what I did as a kid. And the answer changed my life. She said, had you ever considered cybersecurity? To that point, I never even realized that security was an actual industry. You could have jobs related to security. So just to try it out, I took a class on network security, and I was hooked from day one. I knew I'd found my passion. I'd found my path, something I really enjoyed. So I finished my path at Howard Community College, enrolled in an online university, finished my bachelor's in computers and cloud system administration, enrolled in a master's, got a bunch of certifications all the way, and got my first job with Booz Allen Hamilton. Actually spent my first couple years cutting my teeth in the IT world as a Splunk consultant, moved on to helping various agencies build out different security programs. Wanted to move out of the consultant space, get a little closer operationally, and a little over a year ago, transitioned to SYNAC, where I'm currently at, doing what I do now.
It's quite the pivot for both of you, and totally different career paths coming there. So what, aside from, oh, you're gonna have to work hard because cyber's hard work. You're always gonna have to work hard in every job that you have. If you're not, why are you doing the job? Aside from working hard at everything you do, what was the biggest lesson you took from your previous career into cyber?
Oh, that's easy for me. I just somehow knew that my library science skills were going to be useful in InfoSec, and I've made quite a little, career of giving talks at conferences about applying library science to information security. Like I'm speaking at the RSA conference next month. My talk is called How to Improve Information Security Through Library Science, because there's a lot of people-centric approaches that I think more tech-minded people don't consider. So that's definitely, I don't know, and people ask me, how did you know? I don't know, I just knew. I just knew that all this knowledge I had, because I have a master's of library and information science from the University of Pittsburgh, and I have 2 undergraduate liberal arts degrees. So, I mean, I do have no tech background, but I have lots of customer-facing experience, and I've really applied that to information security along with all my research skills.
And for me, I love talking to career changers because to succeed in the security industry as a security practitioner, understanding tech is just one piece of the pie. There's so many other skills you need beyond just understanding the ones and the zeros and how data gets moved around. And as a career transitioner, you're not starting from zero when you make this transition. You have a very solid skill set you bring to the table.
Preach it, Tim, preach.
And so for me, making this transition, and I think it's one of the reasons I made this transition so successfully, so quickly, I spent almost 10 years working in retail, so I learned how to talk to people, especially difficult people, being a retail manager. When you look at as a bicycle mechanic, I spent my entire day talking to people, explaining technical concepts to people who had no idea how a bicycle worked. Do you think that has any relation to IT? I learned how to, when a bicycle came into my shop, bicycles don't have manuals. Bicycles, there's nothing you can plug into the computer like a car and it gives you the diagnostic codes. You're just having to very quickly on the fly diagnose a problem, figure out a solution, deploy that solution, and then validate that you fixed it correctly. Once again, that ability to be resourceful and troubleshoot when you don't have access to official resources, that is 100% applicable to what I do on a daily basis in my job. So there's a lot of soft skills. I mean, the tech was easy to learn. With my background and everything, like I said, I had a foundation in tech, but I could learn the technology. It's those other skills of talking with people. How many developers we have out there? Anyone develop? Yes. For you developers, do you love it when a security person comes in and says you need to stop working on your current project and go back to this thing you built last year and go fix it? I have to deal with those difficult conversations all the time because they want to keep moving forward, working on the next thing. And I'm able to rely on the skill sets I developed back in my retail days to be able to have a happy medium there and develop an outcome where everybody's working towards a common solution.
Yeah, something Tim said, well, you hit the nail on the head. When I was in my interview for my first InfoSec job that I mentioned, literally said what Tim just said. They looked at me and they said, we can teach you the tech. We can't teach someone all this other stuff you bring with you. So you really need to promote your transferable skills, whether you worked in fast food or retail, as a travel agent, librarian, whatever it is that you're doing now, you have transferable skills that can apply to this industry. And you can be as technical or as least technical as you want in information security. I don't really think that message gets out there enough because there's, the compliance arm and there's things like that. I mean, think of information security as an umbrella under which many things fall, including cybersecurity. A lot of people use cybersecurity and information security interchangeably. Technically, they are not interchangeable. Technically, cybersecurity is a subset of information security.
I know we've mentioned GRC a couple times today, governance, risk, and compliance, and it doesn't always get the best light, all right? GRC is boring to me. I don't enjoy it, but it is like the accounting of InfoSec. It is 100% necessary in every business. And if you don't have a solid GRC foundation, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. So I know it kind of gets a bad rap, but if you're looking for a career pivot into cyber and not have that uber technical role, GRC is really, hey, did you patch your systems? No. Did you ID all your systems? No. Well, we're going to be here for a while then. That's pretty much GRC over and over again, but it's one of the most critical things in any organization. So I know when we talk about it, it gets a bad rap, but GRC is a definitely viable.
And if I can shed some light on why you might hear InfoSec folks give it a bad rap is because too many organizations confuse compliance with security. Yeah, just because you tick a box doesn't mean that it's secure. So I heard a story actually yesterday. I'm actually here on the other side of the SANS thing. I'm taking a cyber threat intelligence class, and somebody shared a story about how something was plugged in but not on because as far as compliance goes, it had to be plugged in, but it had to be turned on to be secure. and that's why it gets a bad rap from cybersecurity folks, because compliance does not equal security.
So building on that, coming from a non-cyber background to cyber, when interviewing for roles, when new positions come up and you want to go out for those, how have you had to sell yourself saying, hey, I don't come from a technical background, but I have these skills? Has that been a big problem, or what have you found useful to sell yourself to employers and interviewers in that situation?
So for me, the selling myself starts way before the interview. I don't wait till the interview is just the final step for me. You know, we've heard it mentioned, it's a common theme, networking. When I wanted to make the transition, I just started networking. I talked to anyone and everyone, telling my elevator pitch, telling my story, because even with the education and the certifications on my resume, there was still I had no professional experience in IT. I mean, the extent of which I could put IT experience on my resume was saying I helped fix a printer for the car dealership. There's nothing for a recruiter to actually look at my resume and say, yes, I want to talk to you. So I knew I needed someone on the inside to help me sell myself to that company. And so selling myself took place over cups of coffees, it took place over phone calls, it took place over LinkedIn, just to anyone that would listen to my story. Until one day, the guy's name is Ernie Crossland. It started with a customer at my bike shop. I was riding bikes with him one weekend. Another guy was on the trip with us. He owned a gym in DC, and I told him my story. He called me a couple weeks later, said he had one of his personal clients, worked at Booz Allen Hamilton. They're actively looking for people to kind of fill some contracts. Thought of me, so he connected me with this guy, Ernie Crossland. I bought him some coffee one day. We just hung out and talked. I told him my story, what I could do. And he looked at me and says, you're the real deal. I'll make sure you get in. And no joke, I still had to go through the traditional route and everything. I had to talk with the recruiter just before I went for the in-person interview. And this is 100% truth. The recruiter over the phone told me, you're wasting your time if you show up. I see your resume. Ernie speaks for you. But from your resume, there's not any reason we would hire you. But Ernie was sold on me. Ernie was going to go to bat for me. So I showed up for the interview. The rest is history, and kind of, it's been good from there.
So it turns out it is who you know.
Yeah. Yeah, Pastor Tim here has really taken us to church. This is great stuff. Yeah, networking, and branding too. I mean, I was library Sherpa when I was, a librarian, and I turned that into InfoSec Sherpa. Use social media, leverage social media to put yourself out there, start a blog. There are a lot of people who just blog and document their journey into InfoSec. Show people what you've learned, put things out there, talk to people, network. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm shy and things like that. This is your career. If you're not going to be invested in yourself, nobody else is. So you need to do that. And whether it's in person or online, you need to meet folks, ask them for 15 minutes of their time, offer to buy them a coffee, or if it's, virtual, send them a $5, Starbucks thing as a token, a gift card. It's really a lot. It is a lot about networking, but it's also having confidence in knowing what you can offer. Tim mentioned the elevator pitch. Have pre-prepared 1 to 3 sentences about what you can bring to a job. And you may only have a couple minutes to say that to someone. If you ever watched the movie Animal House, when they walk around, Rush Chairman, damn glad to meet you. You need to be like that. Or if you're not that bold, do How I Met Your Mother and have a wingman or a wing woman or a wing person and go around and have you met Ted? Have someone introduce you to people. You need to get out there and talk to people. Go to conferences, like you're here now. I used to go to technical conferences. I would phonetically spell out terms that people were saying because I didn't know what they were talking about. And then I would go up to someone later, either the presenter or someone else in the audience, and say, say, they said this is what I spelled it out phonetically, what is this? And they filled me in, and I've never had anybody rebuff me or be rude or anything, because, you know, I'm trying. And one important piece of advice I want to mention is, if you do ask someone questions, please, please, please do your research first. I can't tell you how many times I've had people start a phone call with me, and I had this one woman with her, what's that the voice cracking thing that they do, the vocal fry, with the deep vocal fry. I go, how do you do it? And I said, do what? Security. How do you do cyber security? And I'm like, yeah, this call's over. Like, nope. Do your research first. Like, and then when you approach someone, say, I looked here, here, and here, and I could not find my answer. And then have a very specific question, because we're busy. We do want to help, but please understand, we are very busy. So it's really to your advantage to be succinct, do your research, show your work. It's a math problem, right? Show your work, and then tailor your questions to be very specific, because you don't want to waste someone's time. You want to value that relationship.
I remember there was a guy I worked with at the Pentagon named John Bird. He was a reverse engineer, probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. But if you asked him a question, the first response, what did Google say? And if you didn't have an answer for that, it was just the conversation went downhill from there. So again, be prepared in your questions. But again, always take the time. Like you mentioned, someone writing a blog documenting their journey through cyber. That's a fantastic idea. Simeon mentioned earlier, hey, comment on these posts that you see, interact with the community. Understand there is I think Matt mentioned, there's a fair amount of toxicity in the community. There's a fair amount of just real pedantic people in the community. Avoid that. I think Tanisha mentioned find your squad. They do exist in cyber. Find them and hang out with them and be with them and just ignore everybody else. And you'll be all right. I wanted to move on to, besides the salary, and for me it was different because I've been in the government for so long, my salary was always public. Like, you're a GS blah, 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 living in DC, you make X dollars. So aside from salary in the cyber world, what was a moment for you when you were like, hey, I'm here now, I work in cyber, this is what I do? Like, was there a moment for you?
I guess speaking at my first Security B-Sides conference. I think I was still technically a librarian, okay, but I spoke at B-Sides Philly, and I did basically an OSINT, open source intelligence talk, and I was convinced that I was just going to get eaten alive by all the, quote unquote hackers, all the scary hackers in the audience. Just a few minutes into my talk, when I was kind of asking the audience some questions, that's when the penny dropped of like, oh, I know this stuff and they don't. And at the end of my talk, this particularly hackery looking gentleman came up to me, and he said, before your talk, I didn't know that Twitter was a website. I only thought it was an API. And that floored me. And he was telling me to thank me. He's like, you've showed me this whole other world of GUI resources, graphic user interface resources that he's like, I'm very command line driven. And that just kind of floored me. And that's when that gave me the confidence. I was like, oh, I do know some stuff that you people don't. And yeah, I think that's when I felt like, oh, I was here. And then a month later, I went to ShmooCon. And I asked a question after, in a session, and I started off with, I almost apologizing that I was a librarian, and the crowd, people were like saying expletives like blank, yeah, we love librarians, but they also got my
InfoSec's a vocal crowd to really kind of get into things.
But they got my skill set. A lot of people, when they heard I was a librarian, especially at a law firm, they'd be like, oh, what do you read the books to the lawyers? No, dummy, I do research. And that ShmooCon crowd, they knew it right away. People were coming up to me and going, oh, you know how to find some stuff. I'm like, I do know how to find some stuff. So yeah, I think that those two moments combined back to back, those 2 months, I was like, oh, okay, I found my new home. I found my peeps.
Nice. So I think for me, kind of the moment where it clicked, like, this is legit for me. Several contracts into Booz Allen, Like I mentioned, I started off doing a lot of Splunk work. That was more just general IT related. But I moved on to this one contract supporting a federal agency that was previously had outsourced their entire security program. They weren't doing anything in-house. They were just relying on other people. They wanted to bring it all in-house so that they could be more self-sufficient and agilely respond to threats. So I was leading a team of people that were helping them build this out. And you know, it seems like Splunk's a sponsor of this, but I was working in Splunk. I'm a big Splunk fanboy.
I'll give you a shirt later.
So I was building this Splunk dashboard, and I'm also a big fan of MITRE and some of the work, a lot of the work they do. And I always try to incorporate MITRE into what I'm doing just as a vendor agnostic taxonomy to discussing threats in the landscape. And so I built this dashboard that incorporated threat intelligence and incorporated their tools and detections they had in place, because they had zero idea what their security posture was. Like when they were getting intelligence and they were facing threats, like they would just kind of shrug their shoulders like, I hope we're protected, we don't know. So I built out this dashboard that kind of put it all into this visual representation so they could very quickly, you know, figure out what do we need to do based off this current threat. And shortly after I built this application and series of dashboards, I was in a meeting with the C-suite of this agency, and the threat intel guys were giving their latest, you know, debriefs as, you know, here's the latest actor and kind of the tactics that they're using. The CIO said, you know, how do we stand against this? And I was able to pull up my dashboard. We quickly saw some weaknesses in their current posture, and we were able to create some actions out of it to go deploy some additional detections, kind of dig into some logs just to verify that they were secure. And yeah, I walked away from that thinking, man, I actually did something that I led a team. I did something that increased the security posture of an organization that's critical to our infrastructure. So it was something I was proud of and really legitimized all the work I've been doing the previous several years. Thanks.
For me, I'll let you know when that moment happens. Every day it feels like it's something new. I think one of the highlights, and find me at the reception later, well, I'll tell you the whole story, when I got a call at work at the White House one day. Hey, Press Secretary Spicer tweeted out what looks like his password. We need you to call Air Force One and figure it out. I'm like, I don't know how to call a plane. I've actually only seen it. So that was a whole day, but that was a moment I was like, I guess I do computers now. This is what I do. So you've both been doing this for a while. Been doing this, you know, back when there were wooden ships, I guess. What was the best advice you got along the way? And keep in mind, there's going to be a follow-up.
I can go first while you're thinking. So I've received this several ways. You know, it's learn to learn, fall in love with learning, never stop learning. It's learning is a continuous thing in this industry, and I work with SANS as a mentor in the Immersion Academy, and I've got a cohort I'm helping right now. And it's one of the first things I always tell people is that, you know, you better enjoy learning, because you're doing it the rest of your career. There's always a new threat, there's always a new technology, there's always a new framework. So you better enjoy it, because in order to stay, you know, at the forefront of this industry and stay relevant, you know, next month is going to be something new. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't have to worry about API security and container security and such, but it's something that's very the forefront of the threat landscape today. So yeah, as far as advice, it's really learn to learn and love to learn.
Yeah, that definitely was advice given to me as well about learning. So to say something different then, I guess another piece of advice I was given was know when to have roots and know when to have wings. You know, don't stay too long at a job that if it's toxic or not fulfilling or just something you're not interested in. You know when you need to fly, and know when you need to stay put. And for a Gen Xer like myself, that can be very difficult, because for those of you who don't understand what I mean by that, Gen Xers were pretty much raised to believe that kind of that boomer mentality that you need to stay at a job for a long time. And Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, usually like 2 years. Everyone's like, you can't leave a job unless you're there for at least 2 years. And that's not that. So my, millennial and Gen Z friends that I know now are like that. Nobody believes that anymore. And I'm mostly over it. But I would say, yeah, that's why this advice might only pertain to some folks. But yeah, just know when you should have roots, know when you should have wings, and yeah, don't be afraid to sprout some wings.
Yeah, I think what the two truisms for me throughout my career have been, no one takes care of you like you. No one is going to advocate for you like you will. That promotion you want, that job you want to go for, no one's going to put you up for it unless you do it yourself. And the second one, building on yours, is when no one has your back, it's time to move your back. So there are jobs we have, there are roles we have, and sometimes it's not a great fit. Sometimes it's time to move on and realize that, and don't just stay there for the sake of staying there. I think those two big things have guided me a long way. Yep. So flip side of that, what was the worst advice you got?
Oh, this is easy. I was told when I was still a librarian trying to make my career pivot, just get a CISSP and you'll be fine, the CISSP certification. And this was said to me as if I could just go to the grocery store and get it. Oh, just go get yourself one. It's fine. Well, that's not the case. You need to have years of experience.
5 years experience initially.
Yeah, 5 years of experience, and then there's always the people going, well, there's the provisional CISSP. Okay, again, context. I told you I was still a librarian, and being given this information. So I know we don't have enough time to do the whole certification argument. Let me just say this one thing. If someone gives you advice, solicited or unsolicited, more often is the case, about certifications, remember the provenance of that information, the source of that information. If that person giving you that information, and I'm gonna say this, is a straight white male who's been in IT his entire career and tells you don't need a certification, that works for him. That didn't work for me. Coming from a liberal arts background, being a woman in this industry, I needed to prove that I had the chops to do this job. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to have certifications. So if someone gives you advice, just remember the context of where it's coming from to help frame it in your mind. And that took me a little bit to realize, because then I was panicking. I'm like, what's the CISSP? Where do I get one? How do I do this? And then someone like calmed me down. I was like, shh, it's okay. It's okay. That was bad advice. That was bad. Here you go. So I'm telling you that now so you can be armed of, if someone's giving you advice, think about, or even ask questions of like, well, try to determine their experience of where are they giving that recommendation from.
I think Tracy was reading my notes, because my worst advice is very similar. I remember I was sitting, it was one of the first classes I took at the community college, and I love my teacher friends. A lot of my teachers are the main reason I made this transition, but this was one of those teachers that was a teacher and never a practitioner his entire life. Which when you're teaching cybersecurity, it's very hard to teach what you've never done. But he was sitting there day one of class, he was giving a spiel, and he says, look, all you have to do is go out there, get your Network Plus, Security Plus, you'll be making $100,000 a year every year for the rest of your life. It's that easy. So I did that. I went and got my Network Plus, Security Plus, and there was no recruiters knocking at my door. It's not that easy. It does take work. It does take effort. At least you got to start with some real certifications like some GX. But and I'm not knocking CompTIA. I'm a big fan of what they do, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot more than just throwing some certifications on your LinkedIn and your resume and calling it a day. You need to put in more than just that.
Yeah, they're not magic beans, despite what they tell you. Can I just tell a quick story, real? You mentioned about academics. One of the worst cybersecurity conversations or fights, I should say, I got into was with an academic who announced to everyone that everyone's grandparent should have a burner phone. And I'm like, nope, I gotta say something, nope. And arguing with me, and finally just exasperated, I said, that's not Nana and Pop-Pop's threat model.
Are your grandparents in the Mossad? Is that?
Yeah, it was, so yeah, I'm glad Tim mentioned that, yeah. And again, so I'm not trying, I am trying to knock academics in a way, but yeah, unless someone's a practitioner in the field, you have a very different perspective of what goes on. So him, literally in his ivory tower was like, oh, every senior citizen should have a burner phone. That's not practical. That's not practical. That's not. So it made me nuts, and I just kind of thought of that line, like it just was coming out of my mouth of like, no, that's that's not the threat model of mom and pop up. Like that's just not feasible. So.
So for me, I think along the way, it's just keep your head down, grind, and work, right? Stay on your grind, stay on your hustle, keep doing it, and you'll get there. That's not true. Like, that's 100% not true. We've said how many times today, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That helps you get your foot in the door. The communities, the groups that you'll be a part of, the conferences you'll go to be part of, the happy hours that you'll go hang out at, all of those things will help you out as much as the hard work you're gonna put into it. The community aspect of it, and again, the community is what it is, right? There are good parts of it, there are bad parts of it. It's really up to you. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. Do you want to be this toxic person in the community, or do you want to be a person that helps? Like, either way, it's going to happen. So I think the idea of just you can do it on your own, you really can't. This field is way too wide. This field is way too many different facets of it to learn all on your own. So find that group, find that squad, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing. The idea of doing it on your own was the biggest fallacy.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually heard a study the other day that this professor noticed that one group of students were doing really well in this math class, and some others weren't. So he was trying to figure out why, and it was because the students who did well studied together. The ones who were doing poorly were studying by themselves. And I thought that was very interesting. So yeah, consider that. And also keep in mind there are folks who, there's industry and there's community. And they're two separate things. I've worked with some folks who are strictly 9 to 5, never gone to a conference, never been on, don't do InfoSec Twitter, and that's fine. That's what they wanted. So keep in mind, not everybody is community. Some are just straight up, this is my job. I have other interests. I don't care about any conferences or anything. And that's fine for them, but just don't be surprised if you're like, oh, I can't believe you didn't go to this hacker meetup. And they're probably like, yeah, I don't care.
So we're getting short on time here. I want to give it time to any questions at the end. What was the piece of advice you wished you had gotten that would have helped you out a little bit more? I mean, obviously everything worked out. You're at the place where you are now in your career, and it's fantastic. But like, if you were a little librarian, Tracy, what would you wish you would have heard?
I don't know there was advice as much as I just wish I had the confidence to get into tech and cybersecurity sooner. I mean, I lamented this to someone, the gentleman that I'm friends with, and he looked at me and he's like, "You're here now." And there's a famous Arthur Ashe quote of, and I always screw up this quote, so pardon me. It's like, start where you are, do with what you can, and go forward. And that's not the quote, but you get the gist. Yeah, so it's really not advice. It's just, regrets. I have a few, but then again, too few to mention. I just wish I had gotten into it sooner. And I wanted to mention that here because in case any of you were also feeling that of like, man, like I'm gonna do this, but man, I really regret not doing it sooner. You know what? We don't have time machines. It's just, you're here now. I mean, you should just be very proud of yourself for being here today or being online today. You're here now. Welcome. One of us. Go forward.
And I think for me, just real quickly, it relates to imposter syndrome. SANS has some great resources and webcasts that kind of really deep dive into this, so definitely check that out. But the advice is imposter syndrome is not negative. It actually is something that should be used as a positive, because I never want to walk into a room, no matter how long I've been doing this, thinking, I've got this under control, I know it all. I always want to have that, I can learn more, I can do more, I can be better. One of my personal sayings, I think it used to be on my LinkedIn, I might have changed, I haven't looked recently, but I may not be an expert today, but give me 48 hours. I can figure it out. And so for me, it was how to use imposter syndrome that most people look at as negative, but use it as a drive and motivating factor to help me excel more.
Yes, my imposter syndrome kind of haunts me every day when I speak publicly. It's, oh my God, why am I doing this? Why am I here? I think the biggest piece of advice I wish I would have gotten is not really cyber advice, it's just that self-confidence that I think all of us wish we had a little bit more of generally. Like all of you are here, I believe in all of you that came to this summit today in person and online. Like, I believe in all of you. You should believe in yourself. And that's just the hardest thing to convey digitally and in the field. And I think you get that over time. But I think it's that community, that squad that helps you with that. It's if you being here today, you saying, hey, I want to be in the field of cyber, that's pretty much all it takes. Like, there's hard work, there's employment, blah, 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 maybe a blog or a Twitter account, but at the end of the day, it's just you showing up and putting in the work. And that's what makes you part of the community. So I hope everyone out there watching and listening remembers that. So to wrap this up, after this day is over, where can I find you? Chill a little bit. What do you got going on?
So I'm on Twitter at InfoSecSherpa. From there, you can also see my link tree where I do have a blog. I blog about OSINT, again, open source intelligence. I'll take a tool and I'll write about it, break it down. I also do a daily news roundup, and my specialty is trying to get those 10 cybersecurity news stories that probably flew under the radar. And actually, I should say daily-ish. Sometimes it's not every day. But yeah, so I'm InfoSec Sherpa online. You'll find me from there.
For me, the easiest way is just LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm the most active. I do have a blog I just recently started. No blog post there right now. It's at therebelslicer.com. But I have a few personal tools that I'm working on, and I'm going to be documenting kind of the journey and stuff I'm learning along the way. So post to come. But yeah, that's how to find me.
I'm on Twitter or pretty much just look up No Hack Me and you'll find me there. I'm oddly Googleable. After this, I do a show on YouTube for Splunk called Coffee Talk with Serge, a team I'm on, Ryan Kovar and Audra Streetman, who also pivoted to cyber from 10 years of broadcast journalism experience, just said, hey, I want to cyber one day, and we hired her, and she's fantastic. I'll be at RSA next month where we're releasing a book we wrote with a bunch of folks in the community. So if you're around, check it out. But yeah, I'm generally around, so I'm in South Baltimore if anyone wants a beer.